All right, so I'm living off grid here. We are on a large acreage. We've got a solar powered system that's about 20 kilowatts of panels that produces all the energy we need to live off grid. And that is with these cloudy, dark days that we get in the winter. The one caveat to my system, the one kind of crux of my system is that I also drive an electric car, a Tesla Model X. I've had this car for 3 years. And in this video, I want to talk about how this performs when you're living off grid, what the realities of are for the energy that goes into it, kind of how your driving habits change, a bunch of stuff. I've been watching it for a while. I want to talk about it in this video. I'm going to move the car inside because I just put it here for the thumbnail. I'm going to move it inside where it's warm because that's an important part of having an electric vehicle in cold weather. For many of you who've been following my videos for the last maybe year or so, know that I'm living off grid. I'm on a large acreage that is sort of a permaculture prepper property that I'm developing, and I post videos for that regularly at fromthefield.tv. So if you want to get up to date, that's the place to do it. But in this video, I wanted to talk about something that many probably don't know, is that I drive a Tesla Model X. And you might be thinking, why the hell do you drive such a fancy car? Well, I'll tell you. For the first 2 years of me going on sort of a new career path, which was to create fromthefield.tv, I was on the road a lot, making videos with great farmers that you've seen some of here on YouTube, and if you're From the Field member, you've seen many. And so I spent a lot of time in a vehicle. For the first 2 years, I was on the road driving for probably in total of about 3 months a year, which is a lot. And I also have a family. So that's why I have a car like this, is because I spent a lot of time on the road. I have a family. I was bringing them with me. We wanted to be comfortable. We wanted to be safe. We wanted to have some fun with it. And I've always liked Tesla. Not a perfect company for sure. There's certainly some flaws to it, but that's why I have it. So I was making money doing it, so it was a write-off. It was a good thing to do at the time. However, I still have it, and I'm off grid. And part of me, when I first started this adventure, part of me wanted to sell this car because it is an expensive vehicle. There's no question about it. I think the Model X is not quite the most expensive Tesla you can get, but it's up there. So it's a big deal. And I thought, why do I need this? We're living off grid. And we're prepping. You know, this car, some of the biggest problems with Tesla is they're so centralized. And this car could literally drive me to the gulag. It has the technology to do that. So that's not great. But the reason I didn't sell it is because it's actually been pretty cool with our off-grid system to run this car, because for most of the year, say the vast majority of the year, I want to say it's 75% of the year, this car is free to drive from the power that is produced from our off-grid system. But the winter is an entirely other different animal. And that's mostly what I'm going to talk about in this video, because that's really where it matters. For most of the year, this system produces so much extra power. We have 20 kilowatts of solar panels, so that's 48 435 watt panels. I think they're 435. And we have, 3 charge controllers for that, 2 inverters, and we've got 96 kilowatt hours of batteries here. So it's a big system. It can produce and store a lot of power, which is awesome. The biggest problem is this car also has 100 kilowatt hours of battery. Almost the same, actually a little bit bigger than this system. So to plug this car into these batteries and drain these batteries is kind of insane, because it could suck these things dry real quick, and then all of a sudden you don't have lights in the kitchen to do the dishes and you're in trouble from your wife. So that's kind of the issue. And so I'm going to get in the car and talk about some of more of the details of how this whole thing has been working for me. All right, so I've made a bunch of notes about this, which I want to address. So the first thing is, I want to talk about some of the pros that there are to this. And I think it's fairly obvious. If I have free power from solar, essentially free. I mean, of course, it's not entirely free because you've got an investment on that system. This whole system thus far has cost me about 130 grand. So it's a big system. but that's quite a bit of money. That's no chump change. So you've got that in. But however, once you're producing free power, and that means you can drive this car for free. And I would say that is for at least 75% of the year. It all depends on how much you drive too, right? Ultimately, if at the coldest part of winter here, if I didn't have to drive as much as I do, I wouldn't have to do some of the things that I'm going to tell you about here. So that's a pro. It's free, and hey, that's great. The other thing that's really kind of cool about it actually is you have energy optionality with an electric vehicle. So this isn't an exclusive thing to Tesla by any stretch of the imagination, but I can charge this car with solar, that's energy coming in for free whenever, but I can also charge it with diesel. I've got a 13 kilowatt Yanmar diesel generator there, and I don't actually have to use that much. The only real reason I've had to use it this year at all is to charge this damn car in the winter. So that's actually kind of a cool thing, that I have energy optionality. I can use diesel, and I use a lot of diesel up on my property here because diesel is what all my machinery runs on, my skid steer, Mini X. What else is on diesel? That's it. But that's a lot of diesel because we run those machines a lot under construction. But I can also burn it to charge these batteries in the system or charge these batteries in this car. So those are the pros. It's pretty cool. So some of the cons, the biggest con is that if it's cloudy like right now, my system, actually I'll just look at the app right here. I can actually just see in real time. I use an app called Insight Mobile. It's this system that I have is a Schneider Electric system, and they have their own suite of software, and I've got this app. So right now my system is producing, if you can see up top there, 1.7 kilowatts coming in, and I'm also sucking from the battery. I'm sucking 1.9 kilowatts from the battery, and there's 1.7 kilowatts coming in. The house is consuming 3.5 kilowatts. That's probably because the hot water tank is charging up. Otherwise, we wouldn't be consuming much just to have the power on the lights and things like that. So that's what's coming in. And so on a cloudy day like this, you can't really charge the car unless you run the diesel. And I'll talk about that in a second here. So that's one of the disadvantages. The other disadvantage is that in the winter, if you have not only we have short days, and the vast majority of days, at least on the southern side of the winter solstice, are cloudy like this. Like I did a video before I mentioned, in 31 days I had 6 days of sunshine, and then I had 5 other days that were kind of mixed. But that's a lot of dark days. So not only do I have that, but the days are short. So up here where I'm at on the planet, in southern British Columbia, at the winter solstice, we're getting sun. The sun breaches the mountains for us at about 7:50, call it 8 a.m., and it goes down behind the mountains at about 4:15. So not a lot of hours of daylight there. And so that means that if you want to charge this car from sun, even if you're sunny, it's going to take multiple days to charge, and that's just the reality of it. I don't have to drive every day, so I probably only go into town 2 days a week, 1 or 2 days a week. So it can work when days are sunny. So let's talk about the diesel situation with the generator. So that generator, I've run the numbers on it. It's pretty good for 1 liter of diesel, which costs currently right now $1.40 Canadian. 1 liter of diesel will produce me 5 kilowatt hours of charge into the battery or wherever that load is going. As that converts into the car, 5 kilowatt hours equals 20 kilometers of charge. So on these vehicles, you've got your you've got your battery level there, and you can measure that in a percentage. I think you can measure it in kilowatt hours, but you can also just get it to show what the approximate kilometers of driving you would have there, which I like because it's just easy to understand. The biggest thing with these, the biggest problem with the Tesla is that in the winter time, when it's this cold, and we've had a very cold winter so far. We're in a little bit of a cold spell right now where we're getting down to at least minus 20 Celsius at night. And we were down to about minus 28 Celsius. Days are hovering around minus 10 to minus 15. So it's cold. To drive this car during this time when it's this cold, I get about 56% efficiency. Okay, so that's brutal. That means that I'm spending almost twice as much power to drive the same distance as I would in the summer. So in the summertime, well, let's call it, but there's about 5 months of the year where this car optimally operates, and then it becomes slightly diminishing on the shoulders of that time period, which isn't really that noticeable. Maybe in the spring and fall, it's running at 80% efficiency, say. I don't know, actually, I haven't really paid attention to the numbers in that time period. I've just paid attention to the coldest and the warmest. But in the winter, you really, really notice it. So 56% efficiency. So I've crunched some numbers on that. And if I run that diesel generator to charge this car, for the warm months, I'm getting good mileage. 1 liter for 5 kilowatts converts to about 5 liters per 100 kilometers in warm weather, which is good efficiency. It's good enough efficiency. A Toyota Prius is 4.4 kilometers per 100, or 4.4 liters per 100 kilometers. And so it's not better than that, but I'm only charging it with diesel the odd times. When you look at the overall, it's actually great efficiency. If I'm plugging it in, the sun is powering this car, it's the ultimate efficiency. But if I have to burn diesel to charge this car, when I look at that 56% efficiency and I apply that to my 1 liter of diesel for 5 kilowatt hours of charge, that works out to be 8.92 liters of diesel per 100 kilometers, which is horrendous. That's probably worse than a gas guzzling, like what would be your most gas guzzling car, like a Hummer or something like that. I mean, I don't know, I haven't even looked at it, but I would guess that I bet you an F-150 is more efficient than that. So it's horrible. But keep in mind, even if I'm doing that, which there's no doubt I have done in the odd time, when you look at the total amount of kilowatt hours produced from my system here into this car, even if I'm paying that much of a ridiculous price for diesel, in the grand scheme of things, it's a fart in the wind. It's nothing. So that's kind of how it breaks down. Now there's some other things that I want. Oh, another con actually about having a Tesla off-grid. Before I want to talk about some things about how to operate the vehicle and how I manage my energy. But owning a Tesla, there's a couple things I want to comment about that. And I'm hoping that somehow this makes its way back to Elon Musk or people at Tesla that can do something about it. Tesla's service program is totally centralized. Okay, so that means that only Tesla can legitimately work on Teslas. I mean, there's guys like Rich Rebuilds, or there's people that can work on Teslas. You can. But anything under their warranty has to go through Tesla. So this car has still another 5 years of warranty. So anything that's going on with this is going to go through Tesla. And I've had a lot of things to do with this car. It's been, I don't want to say it's a lemon, because it's been great for the most part. I've put over 60,000 kilometers on this car. I've driven through something like 27 US states, driven across Canada with this thing, driven down to Mexico. So it's been overall good, but the times that I've had to do service, it sucks. It sucks because only Tesla can do it, so it's inconvenient. The timing, well, it's not totally inconvenient. It's convenient in that they'll show up. They have a mobile service. They'll just show up to your place and do it. And they can even get into your car, which is kind of scary, but they can get into your car without you being there, but whatever. They can fix it, so it's kind of convenient in that way. But if you have to wait for parts, which I have a little story of, and if you're rural, out of the way like I am, it's a total pain in the ass. And so there was one time where we had a issue at the Falcon door, and basically I couldn't safely drive the car because the Falcon door couldn't close. It was insane. It took 2 months to get those parts. That means that I didn't have this car for 2 months. In the end, it actually didn't really matter in my lifestyle because we were building this place at the time and this system wasn't totally built, so I wasn't really that much inconvenienced. But for most people, 2 months not having a vehicle would suck. So there was that. And now the other thing is that, like, I've got another little thing with the window to get fixed here. One of the problems with Teslas, especially I think it's all the Teslas, the windows aren't attached to they're just, I don't know, whatever you call that, but there's no part of the door above the window. So in the wintertime, when it's like -20, the windows will stick, and then you'll go to roll them down. I think this can happen with other cars too, but whatever. Anyways, I've been waiting for a part for that, and I have to go into town to do that. And it's a pain in the ass because I can't get service where I live. No, I can't even get service in the closest small town to me. I have to go back to my hometown, Kelowna, to get service, which is fairly inconvenient. So that's a drawback to having a Tesla and being off-grid. If you're off-grid, you're most likely living in the sticks like we are. We are in a vast area with forests and mountains and rivers, and there's very few people around us, which is what we love. But anyways, it's a downside to having a Tesla and living off-grid. So let's talk about operating the vehicle and kind of how that goes. Some of this will connect into what we talked about earlier with the efficiency of the vehicle. But one thing that's super important, if you have an electric vehicle like this, any electric vehicle really, and you live off-grid, is if you're going to drive that vehicle in the winter, you must keep it warm. If I were to leave this car outside and not plugged in, it will just constantly lose battery charge. I'm not 100% on why that happens, but I think it might have something to do with the fact that lithium ion needs to be kept at a certain temperature to be able to discharge. And so I'm pretty sure it's using battery to keep the battery warm. The Teslas do a thing called preconditioning. So sometimes if you're driving around and you're navigating to the next supercharger and you're on a trip or something and it's cold, and say you've been sitting for the night, it will heat up the battery to get it warm to accept charge. So they have to have a certain amount of temperature to discharge and charge. And so basically, if you're off grid, power is scarce, and it's not limitless. It's certainly cheap in some ways, but it's not limitless like plugging into the grid. And that's not necessarily cheap either. Well, it is fairly cheap to drive a Tesla and live in a city on grid. I think it works out to be, the cost works out to be, it's something like it makes the efficiency about 1 or 2 liters per 100 kilometers, just when you look at cost. But anyways, that's a whole other subject. So the power is not cheap. It's not cheap per se. So if you leave it outside, you're just diminishing your power. There's a couple nights before we had our power system all set up here, and I had the car outside in the winter, and it drained and this is when it was cold like this, like -18, -20 at night. It would drain about 15 to 20 kilometers just overnight, which is, holy, that can go fast, especially when you drive and you're only driving at 56% efficiency. The car can, like a full charge, might only last you a day or two of short errands. Like it's really, really bad. So you need to keep it warm. That's super, super important. And so that's why I have I built this garage specifically for this car. I don't really need to have a garage for my cars. Well, I have a shop actually. I have a steel Quonset where we can work on vehicles and things like that. But I wanted this specifically to keep the electric vehicle in here warm because it's just going to drain. So what that means is, okay, so even if you can keep it warm, is that you really need to plan ahead on how you're going to run this vehicle. I'm constantly looking at the weather, looking at the forecast on what's coming. I have a trip coming up. And so right now I've got 333 kilometers of charge on the car as we looked at it earlier. And I know I'm going to need all that charge and I'm going to have to do some charging when I get to my destination. I've got a big trip. So I'm looking at the weather right now and I can't charge right now. And I don't want to run the generator necessarily because I can see in a day or so before my trip, I'm going to have some sunshine. So I've only got another 100 kilometers of charge. So call it another 25% left on this vehicle to top it up. I would be way better off using the sun to charge this than burning diesel. Of course, from a cost perspective, but also from an energy efficiency perspective. So one of the things that happens with electric vehicles that I've noticed, and again, I'm no expert on how these engines work or anything like that, but I have a lot of experience driving this vehicle, and I've driven all the other Teslas too. Is that with the power, lithium-ion batteries are kind of like a balloon. So if you have a little kid's balloon for like a birthday party and you go to blow it up, at first it's really hard to blow up. That's what happens with lithium. When you first start charging and say the battery's cool, it needs to get to an optimal state until it can start accepting charge and it goes fast. So basically you actually burn a little bit of power to start. And then once you blow the balloon past that first point, then it becomes really easy to blow it up till about 80%. And then to blow that last little bit is hard. It's the same thing with lithium-ion batteries. And so because I have to charge the last 25%, it's going to take more power to go in than I'm going to get stored in the battery. This is partly why they'll tell you there's no point of charging your vehicle to 100%. And for the most part, I agree with that. For 99% of my trips, that's how I do it. It just makes more sense. However, when I have a long trip coming up and I don't have a lot of charging stations in between and I really need to optimize my mileage to get to my destination, what I do is I'll charge the car to 100%, which if I charge this to 100%, it'll be 460 kilometers of charge. But what'll happen is the first 20 kilometers of you driving, when your battery's that full, it actually bursts out that energy really easily. And so if you don't drive efficiently, you're not actually going to even utilize those kilometers. You'll drive 20K, but you'll have burned 50K of power. So you have to be really aware. These vehicles are they take getting used to, but once you start to understand how the power is consumed and where you get it back and all that, then it can run efficiently. So you need to plan ahead, and you basically need to just drive more conservatively, especially in the winter. And so if you just basically drive within the speed limit, which really, for us with these sketchy road conditions, I want to do that anyways. I actually drive slower than the speed limit because there's some parts on our main road that are just so dangerous. There's accidents on all the time. I want to just drive safe anyways. But so if I drive conservatively, I can get the most amount of mileage. And also paying attention to when you're driving up and when you're driving down. I have a big downhill stretch on one of my regular commutes. And so what I do is there's on the Tesla, there's this thing here. It's an energy meter. It kind of shows you what you're spending out, and it shows you how many kilowatts are going either way, and it'll be in the orange if you're spending power, and it'll go in the green if you are regenerating power. Because one of the great things about these vehicles is that when you take your foot off the gas, you immediately go into regen, especially at a certain point with the brakes too. When you're just touching the brakes, it's all regen. It actually doesn't touch the brake pads until you're really hammering on it. These cars are pretty, they are pretty, pretty neat that way. So that's kind of what it is to operate. So I made some, okay, so here's some other stuff about managing a car like this when you're off-grid. This is actually the most important part of this information. If you're thinking about having a Tesla off-grid, what you really need to look at and be careful with is how much you're pulling from the system and when. So you might have your car plugged in, it's sunny outside, and on these cars, I can show you here, you can tweak how many amps are coming in. So this is only on a 30 amp breaker right now. Oh no, I can't. This is incorrect. That's saying max 48. The breaker that I'm on right now is a 30 amp breaker, and the most I can move into the car when I'm plugged in is 24 amps. I can change that. I am actually going to change that. I'm going to upgrade my breaker, but that's beside the point. So you can tell it how much power you want to have come into the car. But what you need to be careful with is, let's say it's a sunny day and my system is, I'm bringing in like 15 kilowatts from solar. My wife might be doing some laundry inside, which is consuming 3 to 6 kilowatts. And I might have the car plugged in and I'm pulling 24 amps at 120, what was it? 100, maybe it's 240. Anyways, it works out to be, I'm pulling about 3, 4, 5, 6 kilowatts at a time. If you're doing that and the cloud and some clouds come over and all of a sudden you are not producing much solar, say it goes down to like, you're producing 15 kilowatts and then it goes down to like 3 or 2 or 1, which can happen. All of a sudden you have a massive draw from your batteries. And that's not good, because lithium ion batteries, or I think all batteries for that matter, the more you cycle them, meaning the more time you discharge them, the less life they have in them. All batteries have a certain amount of cycles, meaning, so this whole system is 96 kilowatt hours, my home system. I think it's something like 10, 20, or I don't know what it is, but it might be 10, 20, or 30,000 discharges. Let's say it's 10,000. That means that's a limited amount of time I can discharge these batteries. So you want to be aware of what you're discharging. And generally, this is the rule of thumb when you're off grid. You want to run loads off what's coming in from power. And so you want to adjust the way, that's like I said, my wife will run laundry when it's sunny. If it's a beautiful day, boom, just run the dryer, no problem. 6 kilowatts, that's a huge load on batteries, but it's not a huge load for solar. And the system will handle that. So you have to be careful, because if you don't pay attention to what's going on and you just crank this thing up and you're charging it, and say you're out and about, you're out on the property doing something, and it gets cloudy, it's not producing, and you're sucking 24 amps from your system, that's a huge load. And so you're just cycling your batteries more, which isn't good in the long term. So you want to be aware of that. And so it means that you have to kind of micromanage it. Now, there might be a way to do that with software. I'm sure in this day and age there is. Be kind of a smart thing to set up. But I don't have that for now, so I have to watch it, which I actually don't mind, because I'm kind of a nerd with this stuff. I like to watch the system. I like to see what's coming in. I like to decide when to run the generator. I like to do all those things myself. This system will do that automatically. It'll run the generator to charge the batteries at a certain point. I think when they get down to 15% or something like that, it'll run them. But I like to manage it. I think it's fun, and I like to kind of learn about all the nuances of the system. It's interesting to me. And so another thing that I have to be careful with is the way my generator is rigged up is it goes through these 2 inverters that I have. And that means that's just so it can send power in different ways. So it can send up to half of its load. So I think it's like 6.5 kilowatts. It can send to charging the batteries, and it can send half of its load to carrying a load. So if I'm running the generator and it's putting out 13 kilowatts, which is what it does at its max, it can send 6.5 to the generator, to the batteries to charge them, and then I can send another 6.5 to the load in the house. Now this is where I have to be careful, is if I am charging the Tesla, let's say, because if I don't get sun in the next couple days, I'm going to have to top it up with a bit of power for my trip. And if I'm doing that, I've got, and I'm going full load, 24 amps on the car, which I think works out to be with the voltage. I forget the voltage off the top of my head, but it works out to be 3 or 4 kilowatt hours. If I'm doing that, and then all of a sudden my wife cranks up the load in the house, poof, one of the breakers goes, and then the generator goes into this cycle mode where it waits 3 minutes and then it tries to load again. And so that can happen if I'm not careful of what I'm doing. And so this is where I might just communicate to my wife. I say, hey, I'm going to charge the car for a few hours and then don't run any heavy loads. Often what I do is I'll just do it at night when my kids are sleeping and my wife is sleeping, and I'm usually up a couple hours later. So I'll just kind of run it then to top it up, or I'll do it early in the morning when we're all up and I can watch it. Something like that. But yeah, that's about all the notes that I had on this. Overall, it's pretty badass. It's pretty badass to be able to drive this car from what I can just produce here locally. And like I said at the beginning, 75% of the year, there's no problem. I mean, that's one thing, actually, that's worth mentioning. One of the challenges I have with my system, and this is a challenge on the other 75% of the year, the warmer side of the year, is that my solar produces too much power that I can actually use, which seems crazy, but it's not. So I have yet, this system was semi-operational by about July this year. We didn't have it, we were only running one of the inverters, but either way, it was producing everything we needed. But the solar was producing, and we could charge the batteries, but we only had access to the one inverter, so we could only run, it was something like six kilowatts at once, which at the time was fine. I didn't have the car here. But now, I mean, because we had this fully operational from about September, so still warm, we still had fairly long days. This system would charge these batteries in the first quarter of the day. So it didn't matter how much power I could use in the day before. If I dented the batteries, which only could have come from the evening, because during the day there's so much floating power from the solar that we're using it all. But the odd time in the night, if we were working late, running power tools, running compressors and stuff like that, we could drain the batteries a little bit, call it 5, 10, maybe 20%. But by 10 a.m. the next day, they're already full, and then the system goes into a float state, which is called a float state, which is basically just where there's solar coming in, batteries are charged, it's meeting the load that's on demand, but then there's excess power that's going nowhere. It's just dissipating. It's a total waste. So the great thing about having the Tesla now is that I essentially have 200 kilowatt hours of battery storage at any given time. And in summertime, I do drive more. It's more back and forth, getting supplies and things like that. And since we're doing, like at the moment at least, a lot of interior stuff, it's smaller construction things. If I need to go into town to get materials, it's small things. Whereas before it was big things with trailers and trucks and whatnot. And that will be the case in the summer too, again, kind of. But so if I have more power, if I'm using the car more, well, it's great, because now I got 200 kilowatts essentially hours that I can charge. So yeah, that's another thing that, again, it's one of these challenges where if you're producing too much power, you have sort of an economic incentive to use that power in some way. Otherwise, you are not capturing the highest yield from your return on it for a return on investment, right? This is, like I said, this system has cost me about 130 grand Canadian so far to set up. That's labor, everything, all materials. That's what it's cost. Big system. If I'm not, it's kind of one of these things that you read a guy like David Holmgren. One of my favorite books is a book called Pathways and Principles Beyond Sustainability. And David Holmgren kind of goes into this philosophy of permaculture through application. I kind of like it. It's like application and philosophy. But one of the sort of principles of permaculture is to establish a yield. It's crucial to establish a yield. You can apply that to anything you do, really. But thinking about this system through those eyes, that's super important. I spent a lot of money and time to have this thing set up. If I'm not capturing the most yield from it, I'm essentially wasting the investment to some degree. So the more places you have to put the power, the better. So I'm actually looking at things like crypto mining, and other ways too, like pumping water. So I've got a series of dams that I'll be building on this property, and I'll be able to pump water in between them, pump uphill, and it won't be pumping the water to generate power from the water, because it's honestly pointless. The way my property's set up, it's not worth it. But moving that water so that water's available to irrigate certain things or be used for fire suppression. So these are the kinds of things that you think about when you've got ways to spend power, because why not? If it can benefit your property in any way, the more you can capture that yield and use it becomes sort of a compounding effect of your return on investment. So anyways, those are my thoughts. Those are the numbers on how it breaks down. And if you're thinking about running an electric vehicle off-grid, it's certainly, I would say overall it's worth it. I certainly don't need this expensive of a vehicle for the context that I'm in. A Model 3 would be fine too. But like I said, when I first got this vehicle, the first 2 years I was on the road all the time. So at that time, it made sense in my context to use this thing. Now it's kind of just like a nice luxury vehicle for the family, which is what it is. So anyways, folks, you want to see more videos like that, head over to FromTheField.tv. Again, it's where I post the vast majority of my content, and we have other great content creators there as well who you can interact with. We have a new platform on there called Community Questions. You can make videos and ask questions to me or any of the other content creators we have in there. All right, guys, see you in the next video.